My name is Christy Scheffler, and I am part of the team at the National ECE Workforce Center. And we are really glad, excuse me, really glad that you're able to join us today for this coffee chat. We are continuing our series that is focused on the ECE Systems Change Framework. And today we're going to be discussing our third topic. So driving systems change in the ECE workforce via early educator engagement and leadership. Um, and we do like to note that our center is supported by a grant from the Administration for Children and Families. And while ACF is the source of our center's funding, we don't necessarily reflect the view or opinions of ACF. And that includes the Office of Early Childhood Development, the Office of Head Start, the Office of Child Care, and the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation. As a reminder or I should say, for those of you who might not be familiar with our center, the National ECE Workforce Center is a joint research and technical assistance center, and we do support state and territory and tribe and community and program leaders to improve the systems that support the ECE workforce. So currently, we're specifically focused on working toward competitive compensation and clear and accessible pathways for the existing workforce. Through our center, we provide services across a continuum of universal, targeted, and intensive supports. And one key feature is that all of our supports are grounded in our systems change framework. And each service that we offer includes a unique blend of research and TA. So coffee chats are one of those supports that we provide. Coffee chats are informal opportunities for systems and program leaders to engage actively in discussing different topics that are related to strengthening those systems that support the ECE workforce. Each coffee chat focuses on a specific topic or product that's coming out from the Workforce Center. And the authors of those products join us for these discussions, walk us through a brief recap of the topic that we're talking about, and then we spend the majority of our time together in smaller conversations where we can both share with and learn from colleagues. As we get started, I want to make sure to call out if it would be helpful for you, you can turn on closed captions by clicking the More on your Zoom taskbar and selecting the language that you would like for captions. Since coffee chats are set up as a conversation rather than a webinar, if you're comfortable and your technology allows for it, we do appreciate having cameras turned on. During the beginning, when we're doing our recap portion, we ask that microphones stay muted, but then once we shift into smaller conversations, we'd love to hear from you directly. And with that, we're going to take a look at the brief that we are discussing today. And I will turn it over to Eugen, Lindsay, and Anne.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Eugene and I'm based at UMass Boston. And I've been part of the change framework development as well as the driver brief that we are gonna do the presentation today. So first of all, I'm really excited to share this brief with you that we are going to release today. So next slide, please. So this brief is part of our change framework brief series. And in this brief, our focus is on how to strengthen and leverage educator engagement and leadership as a driver for systems change. Here is how this brief fits into the overall change framework. Change framework is our theory of change, and it's based on research and policy evidence from our EC field as well as other disciplines. And this is a roadmap and conceptual framework that helps state and community leaders think about workforce issues through a systems approach. As you see in this visual, on the left side, you can see the three aims of the change framework, including competitive and fair compensation, clear and accessible career pathways, and positive working conditions. These are most pressing issues we need to address. And also, this is a desired outcome we are aiming to achieve to better support our EC workforce. And in the middle of the graphic, you see the three primary drivers. You see the primary drivers. These are the areas we need to strengthen to make progress toward the aims. And our framework identifies 9 primary drivers. So 3 practice drivers and 4 infrastructure drivers and 2 principles drivers. Each primary driver has a set of secondary drivers, and these are specific actions and strategies that show how to strengthen and leverage that primary drivers. And in this brief, as well as in today's coffee chat, we are taking a closer look into one of the drivers, engaging early educators in systems change. So this is one of the primary drivers we identified as a principles driver category. And when we talk about this educator engagement brief, the idea we really want to lift up is authentic engagement. So when we talk about authentic engagement, we don't mean we ask for one-time feedback or consulting educators at the end. Instead, we mean that educators are active partners. They are also co-creators, and they are involved in decision making with shared power and shared leadership. That's because, like we all know, educators have the insight and experiences to know what works and what doesn't in the real world. And when educators' engagement is truly authentic, systems change efforts can become more successful, more sustainable, and more impactful. And in our change framework, we have identified 3 secondary drivers. So these are the key strategies that show how to strengthen the educator engagement driver in your change efforts. So now I will pass it to Lindsay to go through each of the secondary drivers in more detail.
Thanks, Yujin. So my name is Lindsay Beatty. I am also based at Early Education Leaders at UMass Boston, and I'm also part of the team who worked on the development of the change framework and the brief that we're discussing today. So let's look a little more closely at each of these 3 secondary drivers that show how to put that primary driver in place. So this first secondary driver is about ensuring educators are authentically engaged as leaders in systems change in the way that Eugen just described, that authentic engagement. Lasting systems change isn't possible without educators at the center. Their daily experience with policies and practice ensures that change efforts are grounded in their real needs. We have many recommendations for this driver in our brief, and I'll describe a few here. So, educator expertise rooted in their classroom practice should carry equal weight, the same as research and administrative perspectives. This leads to a more balanced and accurate decision making when undergoing these change initiatives. States and communities should learn from educator-led efforts that are already underway. We know that educators are already leading change in their states and communities. So by looking at their examples, we can find out what's working, where challenges remain, and it helps prevent duplication of efforts. And rather than entering into these change initiatives with predetermined agendas, leaders and educators should shape that vision together. Authentic dialogue with educators builds shared ownership of the system's change work. So, again, not adding them in after these things have already been established, but truly being co creators from the start. And educator representation should span roles, program types, regions, and experience levels, not just looking at center based directors, right? We need to have educators from different roles, program types, regions, and experience levels. and this ensures that policies and systems work for the full ECE workforce. So now we'll look at the second secondary driver. This one is about making initiatives accessible for educators to engage in. So while we know it's important to authentically engage educators, we know there can be barriers. So that's what this driver is about, is eliminating those barriers and making efforts accessible. So we have some recommendations for this driver as well. To make educator engagement more accessible and participation easier, leaders can hold sessions on site at ECE programs or at community venues rather than having them in locations that are more at the state level or in venues and during times that are inaccessible. Educators should be compensated for their time and supported with things like childcare, substitute coverage, and basic technology help so that they can more actively participate. It's important that their scheduling of these initiatives and the meetings associated with them are aligned with educators' availability. And to the furthest extent possible, their engagement should be built into their paid roles rather than additional work. Written materials for these initiatives should be provided in educators' home languages, and simultaneous interpretation should be made available during meetings when possible. Information should use plain language, and acronyms and technical terms should be defined. Timely and accessible meeting minutes should be provided to help keep everyone informed. We can strengthen the field's capacity for educator-informed systems change by investing in leadership development programs for educators as well. These programs, many exist, and others can be developed to help educators understand systems and policies and build skills in leading change, communication, and advocacy. We recommend partnering with community organizations, professional networks, and especially family childcare networks to help engage educators across diverse roles and program types, and again, ensure that the outreach reflects the full workforce. We also recommend creating cohorts and mentoring networks so that educators have space to learn together, share experiences, and address challenges. These also help build collaboration, confidence, and sustained engagement of educators. And lastly, we recommend providing multiple ways to participate: spoken, written, visual, storytelling. All of this helps educators contribute in ways that match their strengths and helps ensure that educators are fully equipped to lead. And the third secondary driver is about educators having an actual influence and power in these initiatives. So again, we can do all of these things to recruit and engage educators and to make their involvement accessible, but they need to actually have influence and decision-making power in these initiatives. So to start off, authentic engagement requires rethinking how expertise is valued and creating transparent processes with defined roles, timelines, and input mechanisms that ensure educators are included from early planning through implementation and evaluation. Leaders can institutionalize educator influence through things like voting rights, co-chair positions, and required representation on decision-making bodies. These structures signal trust and make educators true partners in shaping priorities. Remember, too, that educators bring firsthand insight into how compensation, career pathways, and working conditions affect their daily work. Leaders should create space to hear these stories, which keep systems change grounded in real practice. Sustaining educators' authentic participation also requires an ongoing assessment of whether educators feel valued and included. So it's important to share back how their input shaped decision making. It builds trust, and all partners should be able to articulate the impact that educators have in the change initiatives. Structured facilitation protocols help ensure all voices are heard. Things like shared glossaries can help to clarify jargon and support collaboration across sectors. Leaders should also identify and address biases that undervalue educator knowledge. Things like site visits to ECE programs where partners actually experience the day in the life of an educator and other collaborative exercises can deepen understanding and reduce biases. Participatory decision-making methods like consensus building and appreciative inquiry help to reinforce shared leadership. And lastly, educators' intellectual and professional contributions should be credited through things like co-authorships, presentations, and other products. So those are just some examples that we have come up with for ways to put that primary driver in place. That's the how to authentically engage educators. Now we want to share two examples with you about how authentic educator engagement can look in action. This first comes from New Mexico. They began a wage scale redesign with the assumption that educators must co-create the policy, not just react to it. So educators were included from the earliest stages of this initiative, shaping the vision and design rather than providing feedback after decisions were made. New Mexico used the state's advisory structure to bring together a task force that included agency leaders, higher education, Head Start advocates, and program directors. And they also brought in family childcare providers and center-based administrators. And these are voices that are often missing in state-level policy conversations, so that was done intentionally. Alongside task force meetings, the state held 10 co-facilitated focus groups with direct service educators. And these sessions were scheduled intentionally around educators' work hours. They were offered virtually, they were embedded into existing meetings, and conducted in Spanish. Educators also received stipends, which made their participation more feasible and valued. And this task force wasn't just advisory, it was empowered to co-design. Educators shaped decisions about how advancement should be recognized, pushing for a system that valued education and experience. And the power sharing of this process made it more equitable and reflective of the workforce. Educator participation directly changed the state's direction. The original focus on degrees alone broadened to include competency-based equivalencies that recognized experience. And the final wage scale balanced state policy priorities with educators' lived realities. And our second example comes from an educator-led initiative. Like we said, these initiatives do not have to come just from state government organizations. They can come from educators themselves. So here we'll describe an initiative led by Carolina Reyes in Maryland. Carolina participated in a initiative called Maryland Early Childhood Leadership Program, or MECLIP. It was a program that provided structured leadership development, systems thinking, and advocacy training. This program, developed with UMass Boston, expanded her capacity to influence statewide policy. Reyes is a bilingual educator and small business owner, so she used her lived experience to identify compensation inequities and propose solutions during and after the pandemic. Her leadership helped elevate the voices of bilingual educators and reflect their realities in policy discussions. MECLIP's cohort model and curriculum made policy engagement more accessible for educators from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds. And this capacity building allowed Reyes and others in the cohort to translate classroom expertise into effective systems level advocacy. Reyes's testimony and storytelling partnerships and advocacy contributed to the passage of HB 1441, which created a statewide career ladder for early educators and ensured college coursework was available in educators' home languages. So this shows what happens when educators have genuine decision-making power. And because educators were leading, the resulting policy was more equitable and grounded in the real workforce needs. So what does that all mean for you and others interested in ECE workforce systems change? We recommend a few next steps to you in our brief that I'll describe here. First, ensure educators help shape goals and priorities early and be explicit about the value of their leadership. Include educators across roles, settings, and lived experiences so decisions reflect the whole workforce. Address obstacles like time, compensation, language access, and geography to enable broad participation. Provide opportunities like training, fellowships, leadership programs that build educators' confidence and skills. Create roles with actual authority and visibly recognize educator contributions, and regularly gather educator feedback and show how it helps shape decisions that can build trust and shared ownership. And through all of this, authentic educator engagement, it leads to solutions grounded in the realities of practice, stronger implementation through early problem solving, greater investment in reforms that educators help design, more equitable decision-making that centers those most impacted, and strong and respected educator leadership within the workforce. And now I'll pass it over to Christy to talk about our discussion.
All right, thank you, Lindsay and Eugen. So that brings us to the main part of our time together today, our smaller breakout rooms. We're going to spend the next 45-ish minutes in smaller discussions with all of you, and then we will come back together at the end before wrapping up. The facilitators in each breakout room are going to review these guidelines, talk through what works for your room, and we'll talk through these questions as well. So, Brianna, are we set to shift to breakouts?
Yeah, you will be moved in just a moment.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We'll give just a moment. It looks like all the rooms closed. All right. Well, I trust that everyone had a good conversation. As we do come back together, well, we'd love to hear a little bit about your experience as well. If anyone is willing to volunteer to maybe share one of your takeaways or one of the things that you kind of spurred you to think about a little bit more. We have a brave soul. Or maybe if one of our facilitators would mind sharing a kind of a summary of some of the conversation that happened in your rooms.
I will not try to summarize the conversation, but I will tell you that one of the things that emerged in the conversation that I thought was really insightful is the power of teaching educators how to have impact by telling their story as an advocacy tool.
I can echo that sentiment. In our group, we also talked about the importance of storytelling and advocacy. Um, and it seems like a lot of the states, we had a little sprinkling of states across the US. It looks like everyone is doing some form of engagement to empower providers to be able to craft their stories because they are storytellers and they should tell their story on additional stages as well.
I love that concept, the sharing stories, sharing experience, doing the storytelling, helping others to see the perspectives that they're bringing. I like it.
I was just going to say in our group, I shared this was a picture that some of us were in a training last week, and this picture was shared. And this is something that really was sitting with me in some of my previous experience in state work of how do you incorporate educator feedback in a way without creating a turkey pizza cookie. And so the group had a really great conversation and got to the point that you need to engage educators as decision makers throughout the process in order to make sure that it is this meaningful, authentic engagement in co-designing versus what we often might do of surveying and gathering and then figuring out how to use that feedback. But instead, actually engaging in the co-designing can help create and design versus try to incorporate so many different perspectives that lead to this turkey pizza cookie approach.
Absolutely. And nobody wants a turkey pizza cookie. So I think this is a really important conversation. And I think that being able to have this space and kind of think through what it looks like in your context, what we want to do better in your context around meaningful, authentic engagement with early childcare educators. So I do want to share this is our final coffee chat for this year for 2025. On our website, we do have brief recordings of the recap portions of the previous coffee chats if you're interested or would like to take a look. And then this is also the page where you'll be able to register for future coffee chats as they're planned out for next year. And we do also have, I want to put a link, we do also have a link to a survey. And I know people get a lot of surveys. I want to have us pause for a moment on this and just call it that we would very much appreciate if you could take a moment to share your perspective, both about today and the topic and the coffee chat series. Your feedback is really essential as we are working to plan out coffee chats in different series moving forward. So anything you can add would be very much appreciated. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. I know carving out an hour and a half in the middle of a workday is not easy to do, and very much appreciate you jumping on and sticking with us and really kind of contributing to this meaningful conversation. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.